So to finish off, I'm going to give a quick demonstration on what I've been working on, which sort of pulls together a lot of the research that has been going on, and a lot of the things that have been discussed today. And we're all pulling it together into this web application that we're calling Dunya. So you've heard a lot about the types of data that we're getting in. We're getting in audio data, we're getting in textual data, metadata, data from Wikipedia, data from other external sources on the internet. We're performing analysis on rhythm of music and the melody of music. And as part of that, once we can actually discover and learn these particular aspects of the music, we can use the ontologies that we've established and be able to suggest, for example, recommendations based on this musical content and sort of additional content around the collections that we've been building. So we're currently working on a proof of concept application using the Kinetic collection so far, and so as you can see, we've got about 200 releases by almost 200 artists as well. One of the things we've decided to do in this project is to refer to the types of objects, the types of entities in the collection very specifically to the style of music. So for example, you can see in the Kinetic we have the standard artists and concerts and works and instruments, but we also add in raga and tala, which you've heard about, the melodic and rhythmic structures of these pieces. And so what we want to do is we want to provide a way for people to explore this music using these musical concepts that are relevant to each particular musical style. So as an example, we want to give the ability to search for objects, search for entities in the database based on particular criteria. So for example, with artists, we might give the ability to search for artists that performed in a particular generation, or artists that are from a particular region, and then based on this information show objects in the database, music, releases, composers, performers that are related to these types of search queries that we're performing. So I'll just give a quick example of what we've got so far. Just to give you an idea of what we're working on. So, for instance, we could perform a search and see some related information. For example, I've just searched for two musicians, and we're showing a collection of information that is related to this particular search query that we've made. For example, some concerts that these musicians have performed in, some information about the musicians themselves, and potentially the instruments that they play. And so we can show additional information on these objects that we have in the database, and we're starting to pull together information from various external sources. So, for example, this biography which we have here is from kucheris.com, which is a Kinetic music repository. We have an image from Wikipedia. We've got cover art from the CDs of this person that we're looking at. And we're also starting to show some related information. For example, we know based on the metadata that we have that this is a violin player, and we know who other violin players are in our collection as well, so we can give recommendations based on this metadata. And again, we can show. So here we're showing information about a particular concert that was performed, and it was released as a CD. So we have some metadata from MusicBrainz. We have some data, for example, the list of tracks that we have. This is from MusicBrainz, and we've entered some information, for example, the raga and tala of a lot of the recordings. We also have information about other people who played on this CD, and then we're starting to get into some more recommendations. And so these recommendations are given based on information that we have based on editorial metadata. So, for instance, we can see compositions with the same raga or with the same tala, or recordings, albums released by people that performed the same songs in a style of music, or other concerts that were performed by the same types of people. So these recommendations sort of start with the editorial metadata that we know, but the next step is to start taking the research that we've been working on and to say, well, now we know how to understand the raga, and we know the idea of a similarity between two ragas, and so we can show not just concerts that have the same raga, but concerts that have ragas that are similar to or near to in this sort of space of ragas. We can say, well, these are similar to but not exactly, so we'll give them as recommendations with sort of an indicator of how similar they actually are. Of course, this is a music discovery tool, so we have the ability to play music. At the moment we have a prototype. So let's see if I can make this a bit smaller. Hopefully this will work. So we've got a prototype where we're trying to show as much musical information as we can, and so we have some extracted information from the actual audio, and at the same time we're wanting to take some of the extracted features, so for example the rhythmic structures that AJ's been talking about and the melodic structures that Sankalp's been talking about. The plan is to show them on top of this view as well. So as an example, I can play a little bit and show that we've got a sort of a standard player where we have the standard cursor, for example. We've got waveform information and we've got timbre information on the bottom as well. We can show more information, zoom in if we need to. I'm just going to show a little bit of where we're working towards and what we're wanting to do sort of in terms of the future and what we're working on at the moment. One thing that we're starting to work on is showing more information in the search results. So for example, the first example I showed where I performed a search with some information from artists, we think we can show more relevant information, for example, ragas and talas that are most commonly performed by these artists, and some more information about related artists, so for example, people who typically commonly performed with them, for example. With some other sort of neat browsing and discovery tools, such as restricting the number of artists or restricting the type of information that we're showing in the search results. So I only want to see results of artists, or I only want to see results of instruments, or I only want to see results of composers. I mentioned a little bit about this idea of similarity, and so considering the idea that we could have any concert, any album that's been released in this collection, and we could calculate a distance that between this album and any other album in the collection, based on particular criteria, based on the ragas that are used, based on the talas that are used, based on the musicians that performed in it, based on the instruments, for example. And so we're looking at some ways of showing this information. We have some ideas, for example, of showing the amount of similarity that each of these types, the amount of each of these types of similarities that are used in deciding how close a recommendation is. So, for example, we've got an idea of some expanded information here where we can say there's a very strong similarity based on raga, and then we can show some examples of why we decide that this is strong, because there are some matching ragas and there are some very close similar ragas also performed in, for example, these two concerts that we're comparing. Just one final sneak peek of where we're going for the for the page that shows our music and lets us play back and interact with it. We've got some additional information here, for example, the beats that AJ was talking about, and some melodic information that we're extracting from the melody of the audio. And so we're wanting to show as much information here as possible to let people understand the music sort of in a more detailed way.